listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
I've been wearing these masks everywhere like everybody else. And you come to the conclusion that there's just no way to make it cool. There's just no way to make it like I wear a buff, which is what they wear on Survivor. So I wear a buff. It's not a neck gaiter because neck gaiters are actually loose at the chin. This one is tight, so it actually conforms to the chin, and I think it feels better than the other. It does wrap around the entire head, so it's not like just loops around the ears, but it's at least a feeling, a little semblance of I'm wearing this, we have to wear it, not complaining about wearing it, but there is a little bit of how do I adapt to it? And I know some people are just quick, boom, I got the mask on, they got it. And to me, it's more like when everybody at school was wearing fanny packs, and I'm like, I don't know if I can make that a thing for me. It looks good on you, and it holds all your stuff. And there was a 2-week period where I wore a fanny pack, to carry stuff in. And the whole time I'm like, I can't adjust to this, And that was a want, not a need. The masks are a need. They're different. The same way, I wore the same type of shoe for years. I was such a mess in the late 80s, as I transitioned from gawky teenager to gawky adult. I didn't improve much. But I had this is so crazy. During high school, I wore Converse, black Chuck Taylor Converse. That was my go-to shoe. That's what I wore. I closed out high school wearing the kind that folded all the way up to your knee. You were supposed to wear them folded down, and I wore them folded up. So I looked absurd. But, gosh, I wish I still had those too. I have pictures somewhere of where, when they finally gave out, I actually hung them on the wall because I thought, well, these are art. These are my Converse, my Chuck Taylors. I'll hang them on the wall. Because they were different because they were so high. But, man, people hated those shoes. And they hated me, and then they hated the shoes, and they hated me in the shoes, and they couldn't decide who they hated more, me or the shoes. But after that, when I started after you get out of high school, I'm sure it was probably different for you, because you're not as weird as I am. But I went and I bought these cheap $9 white slip-on shoes. And that's pretty much what I wore. When they wore out, I just got a new pair of white slip-on shoes. Imagine the cheapest, swap meet, flea market shoe. And I just wore them. And then eventually, I said, okay, I got to upgrade. If I'm ever going to get a date with a girl of any caliber, a living girl, I have to start at the shoes and work up. So I bought these creeper shoes. Remember creepers with the big soles? And I didn't mind that because, they looked cool. Plus, they gave me an extra ½ inch. So I was almost 5 feet tall. And I wore those up until probably 92. And then in 92, I decided I wanted to wear Doc Martens. And after that, I wore Doc Martens quite a bit. When they wore out, they would last a year. I would buy a new pair of Doc Martens. I don't know how I got onto shoes, but it just was one of those things of you have to. Most people just adapt to style. Boom, whatever the new style is, they're wearing it. They look cool in it. I've never been that way. I'm always this neurotic. I don't know if it looks weird. Am I wearing it right? Okay. The mask is different because I'm wearing it out of respect for people. I totally get that aspect to it. But there's also the aspect of I feel like I look ridiculous. Now, it doesn't matter because everybody else looks ridiculous, and I've never really cared about looking ridiculous, but it's still there. Does that make sense? Like when you get a Kentucky Fried Chicken meal, like you don't care about coleslaw, but the coleslaw is there. And no matter what you do, the coleslaw is there until you throw it away and you're like, well, I should have used this. Somebody could have used this. Does anybody want to use it? No, it's too late now. Because now it's like, well, that was yours and I'm not going to use your coleslaw. And that's how the mask is. Like I wash the masks out every night. I just finished washing my buffs so I can start over tomorrow. Because you don't want to wear a dirty one. Wouldn't that negate the whole rigmarole if we wear these dirty masks? So I cleaned the mask and I hung it up. And that's pretty much been my life. Wash, wear, wash, wear. There you go. Repeat. But Halloween is starting this weekend at Knott's. That's our fall event with, Halloween fall decorations and fall-themed dishes and trick-or-treating for kids. And we're trying to do anything we can to salvage this great period of the year. I've been asked to help out with an event there, and if you go to the event, you'll see me at some point. I'm trying not to overplay it because it's not anything. Somebody asked me if it was Tommy Toom, and I'm like, no, it's not anything of that Tommy Toom-esque. I'm simply helping out. I am just a guy who happens to be helping another guy. I'm the dude helping another dude, if that makes sense to you. So that's following, and that's going to last all the way through Halloween. But what I want to talk about today, I made some notes here because I was lying in bed the other night, and I was thinking about, because, we're almost at 500 episodes on this podcast. So, like, hey, Jeff, what is there left to talk about except, watch a movie, talk about it, watch a movie, talk about it. But, that's never been my thing. Tenet was a different thing because I was full of rage. I talked to Alan the other day, and he was like, dude, I laugh so hard because you're so angry. And he's like, I don't want to bring up any bad memories. And I go, no, it's all good, man. I'm so glad you enjoyed it because, you put these podcasts out in the world. You never know if anything's being done with them. You put the message in the bottle and you throw it out in the ocean, and you wonder if somebody's getting it. But, Tenet was different because there's no other movie to watch. And I know I've said I've watched Bill and Ted. Here's the Bill and Ted review, the quick one. Yeah, it was Bill and Ted. It was innocuous. It was fine. It was great. But, it wasn't anything special. And it was kind of a cop-out at the end again. I can't stand these movies that cop-out on the end. We were told that Bill and Ted's music would unite the world. And what they did is kind of a cop-out at the end. Because I thought, I must be dumb. Because I thought the song that united the world was God Gave Rock and Roll to You, which plays over the credits of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. But according to Red Letter Media, Jay, he said that the editor just sort of put that montage together, and that the writers of the creators of the characters never really Solomon and Matheson never really intended for that to be the button on the story. So I find that pretty interesting. But, was it worth $20? I don't know. I got to watch it at home. I got to pause it when I need to go to the bathroom, so I didn't miss anything. Unlike Tenet, where I was like, I think I have to go to the bathroom again. I don't know if I do, but I'm going to go try anyways. Because when I come back, nothing will have changed. But what I came up with lying in bed the other night was, I've watched a lot of bad television. Just really strange shows. Because, when you talk about growing up, because Rachel and I have introduced Josie to Happy Days, and we're watching Happy Days episode by episode. And we're floored by how dirty the show is. I had no idea Happy Days was dirty. Like, I thought it was this really almost Leave It to Beaver-esque look at the 50s, but it's a really out there show. Every episode is about Richie trying to get laid, and Fonzie doesn't get laid with one girl. He always has 5 around him, and they're pretty blatant. And what's interesting about it is the mom and dad, Mr. and Mrs. Cunningham, they're always getting laid too. Like, there's a lot of references to getting frisky and running upstairs. And we just watched an episode where Marion put on like a harem girl outfit. Like, it's out there. And then, of course, the one we watched today was more from Orc, and Josie was like, what the hell am I watching? And I'm like, this is what they did. And then they spun him off in a show that had nothing to do with the 50s, that Mark was suddenly in the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. But those are, I mean, Happy Days is a pretty quality show. Happy Days would be top tier show, you know. If you ask me top tier, and I'm not talking about like high art, just out in the zeitgeist, like Happy Days, Three's Company, The Jeffersons, Dukes of Hazzard, Knight Rider, The A-Team, Riptide, The Fall Guy, Greatest American Hero. Like, I watched a lot of really, what would be considered good television. And then I also watched some of this stuff. And when I was remembering, like, what shows would I watch, and I'd write it down, I'd go, I didn't do any research on these. I didn't look them up and try to figure out the stories behind them. I'm going purely on memory and nostalgia for this one. The first one I thought of was, do you remember, like, okay, I'm going to go into the weeds here for a second. TV for kids began at 3 o'clock because you didn't get home from school till 3 o'clock. You could get up early. Like, if I got up really early in the morning, I could watch Romper Room was on pretty early. And then there was this other show I wrote down called Hot Fudge. Hot Fudge was on really early in the morning. Great Space Coaster and Scooby-Doo. And then here in LA, they played Voltron and Robotech early in the morning and then later in the afternoon. So then you went to school. When you came home from school, you'd check in with Thundercats, G.I. Joe, He-Man, She-Ra, Silverhawks, and syndicated shows. And then at 5 o'clock, they aired Batman with Adam West. They usually aired 2 episodes. And then they slip right into Three's Company, Too Close for Comfort, Facts of Life, and I watched a lot of Bewitched. And then into prime time, boom, then you'd get all the shows I talked about earlier. And then if you were lucky and got to stay home from school, you could watch The Price is Right in the morning. And then they usually aired Alice and either Facts of Life, Silver Spoons, Different Strokes. God, I watched a lot of Alice. Brady Bunch. The Partridge Family would come on, but I didn't watch the Partridge Family. They aired a show here in L.A., Gary Collins' Our Magazine, which, if there was nothing else on, I don't know what you're going to watch. But there were always these pockets where there was no programming, you know. And this is pre-VCR, so it's either on TV and you're watching it or the TV is off. And sometimes you're like, look, I am desperate to watch something on TV. Anything. 84, 85, I discovered Wally George on Channel 56. And he's this crazy conservative guy who practically invented that brand of television where you bring somebody on and just yell at them. And he used to do a hot seat hotline where he would take phone calls and people would either engage him in legitimate discussion. Hey, Wally, what's your opinion? Have you thought about this? Or they would berate him about his hair or the fact that his daughter was Rebecca De Mornay and they had seen her naked in Risky Business. So, I mean, am I in the weeds on television? And that's not even counting all of the commercials in between that I memorized. Like, I knew every second of the commercial for Lake Dolores. It looked like the most amazing place on earth, but when you drive by it on the 15, it looks like Mad Max lives there now. Carvel Ice Cream. Remember Carvel Ice Cream? The guy would go, come on down and get a Fudgy the Whale or a Cookie Puss and Carvel Ice Cream. And by the time I got old enough to afford a Carvel, they were out of business. You can get them in the Ralph's case, but you can't get a fresh one like made of, because he used to have Carvel ice cream shops. But for some reason in like probably mid-80s, they all jetted and they're gone. But, and that's, I mean, I haven't even got into Saturday morning, but, you know, we're going to try to just work in these weird time frames here. But if you remember, like, Saturday morning was cartoons, and once and I won't get into cartoons, that's a whole other episode. But remember Bandstand came on, and that signified the end of cartoons. So you better go play. So Saturday afternoons, you go find something to do, play some Star Wars figures, try to figure out to hook up the Atari 2600. And then circle back around to TV for primetime when all the good shows aired. Because, Friday and Saturday was Dukes of Hazzard. I think it was Knight Rider. good, like this is good stuff. And then Saturday night late was 9 o'clock Love Boat, 10 o'clock Fantasy Island, and I never missed those shows. But there's that weird wilderness right in the middle. And that's where I watch some bizarre shows. The first one I used to watch was Fight Back with David Horowitz. He was a consumer advocate. And every week he would talk about products that didn't do what they promised. He would interview people about products. And then he would have a consumer challenge where they would bring a product on and see if it lived up to what it was saying that it was going to do. And if it did, they exalted it. And if they didn't, they would, make fun of it. Man, I used to watch David Horowitz every week. I'm not sure why. Why did I tune in? At 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whenever it aired, why am I watching the Consumer Advocate show? Totally random. But I remember him vividly. And I remember when he died, I'm like, oh yeah, David Horowitz, man. I used to watch your show all the time. And what did he say at the end? He'd go, if that thing doesn't work, you got to strike back, and I'm here for you. Something like that. David Horowitz, man, strike back. At the same block, I remember they started creeping in syndicated shows. Because I didn't have the concept of what a syndicated show was. Because I knew, like, when a first-run show, like Three's Company, reached 100 episodes, then they would move it into syndication. And then you could watch it every day, because they had enough episodes to run 5 a day for a whole season before they had to repeat. But then they started making shows that were just for syndication. And that was really weird, because they weren't primetime shows, but they weren't repeat shows. And I used to watch all of those stupid shows. I used to watch, the big one, first one I can remember was a show called It's a Living. And I think It's a Living started in primetime and then got quickly bumped out into syndication. Because it wasn't on at primetime for most of its run. But it was about cocktail waitresses at a bar. And the guy would play the piano and the girls would serve drinks and do jokes. It's a Living. I watched it all the time. There was another one similar called We Got It Made, where this actor that was in High School USA with Michael J. Fox, him and his buddy hired like a model to be their maid. And I remember the big deal was she was like in a poster like Heather Thomas in a bikini. And if you went to Spencer Gifts, they actually had that poster. So you could like have the poster from the show. And the girl's name was Terry Copley. And I even think there were a couple episodes where they made her put on like a French maid outfit. And I'm like, I don't know why I like this. Because normally I watch Silver Spoons where they have a lot of toys and video games. But there's something to this show. And I'm not quite sure what it was. And then here in LA, Channel 5, KTLA, they got into the syndicated business in a big way. And they would have a block of Charles in Charge, The New Munsters. Now, I'm not reading these. These are just from memory, folks. Charles in Charge, The New Munsters. What was that show about the alien girl? The theme song was, You May Be Sitting on a Star. I don't remember the name of it. Somebody's yelling at the radio right now. Stars, Child, or something. I don't remember it. I'll look it up. But the big one for me there was a remake of Gidget with it was called The New Gidget. And I had such a crush on that girl in the show, Karen Richmond. And I remember going to the premiere of The Rocketeer and actually seeing her in real life, like, that's the new Gidget, man. Because some of those shows, if you played your cards right, you could actually see them being taped because they were done 3-camera style, but New Gidget was shot single camera out in the wild, so there was no chance to see it. That show was called Out of This World. I just thought of it. The one where the alien and the woman had a baby, and then he leaves, and the kid has powers. Out of This World. Like, they aired all those shows. But there was even a syndicated TV version of Harry and the Hendersons for a while. Just a complete roster of junk food for your eyes. And I watched so much of it. There was a sitcom I watched Now, this was a Saturday night first run sitcom, I believe, and it was called Jennifer Slept Here. And it was about a family that moves into a Hollywood house that is haunted by the ghost of an old movie star named Jennifer, because they're like, oh, this house is famous because Jennifer slept here. And then the boy is like, oh my God, there's a ghost, and no one can see her but him. And the ghost was Ann Gillian. Now, the guy was not Mark, what's his name, Mark Jacoby? That's the kid from Just One of the Guys. This was the guy that looked just like him. I'll have to look him up, because that guy bugged me, because I need to know his name. But these are, Jennifer, she lived here, loved here, and laughed here. She slept, Jennifer slept here. I don't know what she was trying to help him, like, through life so she could get to heaven or something. But it didn't last long. Jennifer slept here. I used to watch Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of. This was on usually Saturday afternoons. If you got exhausted of Star Wars figures, you're like, I've done it all, we've had our battle, I got to put them back in the case, I got to find all the weapons, turn the TV on, and there's this bizarro show called In Search Of. And he just narrated, like, weird stories. And I loved weird stories because I had a steady diet of That's Incredible and Real People. Real People was on NBC, That's Incredible was on ABC. But In Search Of was in syndication. And they would just highlight stuff. And the one I remember vividly, and I think, if I remember right, I watched it on YouTube years ago. Isn't it weird that YouTube's been around so long you can go years ago on YouTube? But it was an episode about a guy in Florida who built like a little mini city out of giant blocks of rock. And he did it without tools, and nobody knows how he moved the rock. So, like, Leonard Nimoy was trying to tell you that they believed he could levitate the rocks. Like, he didn't do it. Like, he had help or something. Even the ancients built the pyramids without help, without, a steam shovel or a crane. But I remember watching In Search Of Aliens, and the one about, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull was actually based off a real legend of this crystal skull, not alien, but a human crystal skull that was made, and it's flawless, and you can look into it and see things, and no one knows who made it or where it came from, and the people who owned it have all died of mysterious circumstances, like the Hope Diamond, it's cursed. In Search Of, man. That's why that Simpsons episode that he's on is so good, because yes, he played Mr. Spock, and yes, he's narrating, but I don't know if people understand, they're parroting In Search Of, not Star Trek or his persona, but actually a show he did after Star Trek, In Search Of, because, Nimoy worked pretty steadily from Mission Impossible to In Search Of, and even Invasion of the Body Snatchers movie, like right after Star Trek. He did pretty well. Shatner was the one who went right back to dinner theater. I watched Real People with Sarah Purcell, Skip Stevenson, and Byron Allen. And they showed stories from across the country of human interest stories, wacky things that had happened. I really liked that show because it was real. It had a comedic slant to it. They used to do funny headlines and profiles of children or old people and stuff. One of the ones I remember the most, I have not looked this up, I should try to find this. They did a story on a car that was going to drive the entire country without stopping. They had figured out how to get enough gas in it or to gas it while it was going, and it wasn't an RV, it was a car. It had some sort of bathroom on it. It had sleeping quarters, and it even had on the outside, I can remember this like it was yesterday, a drinking fountain. Like you could poke your head out and hit a button and get a drink. And I thought that was so cool. I have to look that up. But they would solicit people to send in articles that they would read, like funny headlines and stuff. And I remember every day trying to go through the paper looking for something to send to Real People, because if they use it on the air, they sent you an item, either a sticker or a t-shirt. I'm a Real People. And I'm happy to say that at a thrift store I found a bag of buttons with an actual, authentic, I'm a real people button like they used to send out. And I'm like, oh, man, that's cool. Because that's a little piece of my childhood that would have been impossible to get back in the day because it involved the luck of finding the newspaper article, an envelope, the address, getting your mom to buy a stamp. Like, my kids laugh because I go to the post office nearly every day because of eBay. But most people don't go to the post office like that, you know. When the kids have mail to send out, they're like, oh, Dad's going to the post office. I'm like, you know, I'm a rarity. Most people don't go to the post office. And even people of eBay don't go to the post office because you can arrange pickup. But the few times I've tried that, they don't ever show up here. So I don't do the eBay pickup. That's Incredible. I was hopelessly addicted to. That was Fran Tarkenton, Kathy Lee Crosby, and oh gosh, what's the guy? He was so good. He was on Gilbert Gottfried's pod. John Davidson, really, really good guy. But I love that show because that was like they did world records and crazy stories, and I was addicted to that show. When my mother said she was sending me to camp, the only hesitation I had about going to camp was on Monday night I would miss That's Incredible. Do 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 do. Incredible stories. I loved the show. The one everybody remembers is the Yogi Kudu, and that's the guy that would put himself in a plastic box, a little tiny. He would like fold himself up into a box, and he would stay there. Now the Yogi Kudu is slowing down his breathing so that there's enough air in the box to last him the full hour. That was the coolest thing ever. But they had other great stories too. They did a full story on the house from the Amityville Horror. They did one about a haunted toy store where the toys would move by themselves. They did one about a church. This is one of my favorite stories. It was a church in the middle of nowhere where everybody was supposed to go there that night for choir practice. And one after another, each person involved had some reason why they couldn't go. So nobody went that night. Out of sheer luck, nobody went, and that was the night the church blew up. The boiler in the basement exploded, blew the church up, and nobody died. Like, that's an amazing story. But they also did, and anybody who grew up in my generation knows exactly where I'm going for this next story, because this story scared every kid to death. And that's the story about spontaneous human combustion. They did a story where they talked about how people could just burst into flames and vanish off the face of the earth. They're like, well, you know, Jim was standing there, and the next minute we looked over, and he was gone, and there was a burn mark on the ground. You're like, what? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. The guy burst into flames? Yes. It's called spontaneous human combustion. We don't know why, how it works. We just know that there are cases where people burst into flames. And you go to school and you're like, did you watch That's Incredible? Hell yeah, I did. We got to keep an eye on each other, man, because nobody here is bursting into flames. And A, we're not going to see it, and B, we're not going to know what happened. So if you think you're going to burst into flames, you let somebody know so we can all look. And we were convinced. This episode had us convinced that somebody we knew was going to burst into flames and die. That's how real they made that episode. Isn't that funny? That was the thing. Like, there's all these memes about quicksand, and like, when I was a kid, I thought quicksand was going to be more of a danger to my life. Like, yeah, quicksand, schmicksand. I was afraid of spontaneous human combustion. Because quicksand, you could walk around. Like, I'm not walking through the jungle or the forest without checking. I'll get a stick. But this combustion thing just, boom, happens. You're sitting there. You're playing in television, boom, you're gone. And the controller drops to the ground, and the ashes blow away like the Thanos snap. How do you beat that? You can't. And Fran Tarkenton owes me an explanation. He needs to explain to us this human combustion thing so that we can stop worrying about it. Okay. Another show I watched. This one I only got to watch when I went to either Tennessee, because in Tennessee my relatives had cable or cable box, or one of them even had that giant dish in the back. I remember the giant mega dish. Looks like it's from that movie Contact, like the aliens are gonna contact you. But I used to watch, and everybody knows this show, You Can't Do That on Television on Nickelodeon. Remember You Can't Do That on Television? It was the kid version of Laugh-In. And that's where Alanis Morissette got her start. That's where slime came from, of sliming people. It came from that show. And as a kid who, dreamed of somehow working in entertainment, I could do that. If I could just figure out how to get on that show, I could do that. I didn't know it was out of Canada, so that's not an option. But the other reason everybody tuned in, at least why I tuned in, was for this girl, Moose. I don't know why she was named Moose, but she was like if they turned Peppermint Patty human, but made her hot. That's what Moose was. Moose was like this smart alecky, streetwise, cooler than me. I don't know. Maybe I could go for an ice cream with her. She might hit me, but that'd be okay. What's the great line from League of Their Own where he goes, "How about we go in the back seat and you make me a man?" She goes, "How about I smack you around?" And he goes, "Can we do both?" That's a funny line, and that's Moose, man. I bet Moose is still alive. I should look her up. What does Moose look like today? And does she know that she had legions of young boy fans? I'm sure she had tons of girl fans, but all of us boys were like, you got to keep your eye on Moose. Moose is something special. Speaking of, there was a show I watched on Nickelodeon when I went to Tennessee. So this would have been 1982 when I was 10. It was a show called Today's Special. And it was about a department store. And every night, one of the mannequins would come to life and learn a lesson about life. And there was a real dog. And there was a night watchman who was a puppet. And then there was a woman. That's all I remember of that show. Other than I watched it a lot when I was in Tennessee. Today's Special. I used to watch a show. Now, this show was on Channel 4, and it was usually on at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. What was I doing up that early? Because usually, when you got up that early, you was to go to church or something, and the only show on was Davy and Goliath. And I watched a lot of Davy and Goliath. Gee, Davy, I don't know if that's such a good idea, Davy. Oh, man, I watched a lot of Davy and Goliath. But if you flipped over to channel, because Davy and Goliath was on Channel 9, but if you flipped over to Channel 4, NBC, sometimes they aired a show called Whitney and the Robot. And the song was like, Whitney and the Robot. That's it. That's all I know. It was about a guy named Whitney and his robot. But I watched it. How about this one? Remember Battle of the Network Stars? Didn't they try that recently and it didn't work? But back in the day, in their contracts, the biggest stars on TV had to go to a college in the valley and on their football field play games all day in little shorts. They had the cast of Dukes of Hazzard, The Fall Guy, 8 is Enough, Silver Spoons, you name it, they played Battle of the Network Stars. It was a big deal. Howard Cosell from Wide World of Sports narrated, "Here we are at the Battle of the Network Stars. And now we have Lee Majors." They played running games and Simon Says and you name it. And then the why you tuned in. Do you know why you tuned in? There was a reason you tuned in to Battle of the Network Stars. And that was the dunk tank. Because it was a game you understood. Throw the ball, and the person gets dunked in water. So it's funny, but they had Heather Thomas, Heather Locklear, Charlie's Angels, all of them, and they would be like in these skimpy little swimsuits in the dunk tank. Like, it's hard to believe that was considered family entertainment. Because I've seen them on YouTube. You watch them now, like, you can see pretty much everything. But the men were no better off because they wore these little tiny shorts, left nothing to the imagination. So it was an equal opportunity display. The Battle of the Network Stars. Oh, this one's... I tried to buy this show from one of those guys that sells like bootlegs at conventions. They always have movies you're not supposed to have that have never been released, the director's cut of movies, and then TV shows that have never gotten a proper DVD treatment. So I went up and I said, look, I'm going to buy Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, Scott Baio and Zapped, because that one's really hard to get. But I'm looking for Madam's Place. Do you have Madam's Place? And he gave me a look like, you know that meme where the crab has a cigarette? Like, oh, Madam's Place? Haven't heard that name in years. And he went, well, here's the thing, dude. Madam's Place was in syndication, and for a while it aired daily. So they made a lot of episodes of Madam's Place. I said, well, where is it? He goes, they burned all the negatives. They destroyed them. So only a handful of Madam's Place episodes even still exist. And I was like, that is a crime. What a travesty. Madam's Place was this guy, Waylon Flowers. And he had a puppet of an old woman that he called Madam. And Madam was like Gloria Swanson, this diva from the golden age of Hollywood. And when Waylon Flowers would appear on The Tonight Show, he would just sit there with the puppet. He didn't even try to do any kind of panache with it. He would just work the puppet. Maybe he did a little bit of like keeping his lips from moving, but for the most part, the puppet just talked, and we accepted Madam as a character. So I grew up seeing Madam. So then Madam got her own show, Madam's Place, and it was Madam the puppet, Judy Landers, Corey Feldman, and a few other people. And then at the end, they would show Waylon Flowers, and he would like appear sometimes as himself. But they would do it in a way so you didn't see him operating the puppet. And this show was so ridiculous because Madam had a talk show. So they would do like bits at Madam's house. Madam has a problem of the week. And then at the end of the episode, they would do Madam having her talk show. And everyone just accepted that the puppet was real, that Madam was a real person. And for me, a kid, Madam was a real person. So it didn't bother me at all. Like, that's just Madam's show. And then she'd go, ho, ho, I'm Madam. And then, tragically, Waylon Flowers died very young. If I remember right, I think he died of AIDS, like one of the big first high-profile guys who died of AIDS. I may have it wrong, but I know he was buried with the puppet, and that is so touching and sad because he was very talented. He did he had a career with this puppet long before, what's his name? Jeff, the puppet guy. But, Jeff Dunham. But Madam's Place, man. Here at Madam's Place. I used to watch it all the time. There was another show on, this didn't last very long. It was called Cliffhangers. This was a primetime show on Saturday night. And the gimmick was that it was an hour-long show, but there were 3 stories, so each one was only 20 minutes. So there was a Dracula one, some sort of time travel Western one, and then there was I think a space one or something. Cliffhangers. And the gimmick was that each episode ended on a cliffhanger that you had to tune in next week to see how they resolved it. Now, that appealed to me. That was pretty cool. I've been tempted to buy that one at some of the shows because they do have the full run of Cliffhangers because it didn't last very long. And then, of course, I watched INLA. INLA was on Saturday at 7:30. And it was Chuck Henry and Jan somebody, and they just sort of did stories in and around LA, cool places that are open. The opening of the show was great. It was all that Terry Gilliam-style animation cutouts. INLA was famous because they always had swimsuit episodes. And at one time, they even made you go to 7-Eleven and buy 3D glasses to watch the swimsuit episode in 3D. And guess what? I still have the glasses because I'm a dork. I have my INLA 3D glasses. The other show that was similar was Two on the Town. That was on CBS, and that was Steve Edwards. And can't remember her name. She was on an episode of Buck Rogers. Steve Edwards and some Tawny. No, it's not coming to me. But they did similar stuff, but it was much more soft. You know, it was much more travel log kind of stuff. You know, it wasn't as harsh as Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, which, like, a lot of people watch Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. I never tuned in. I never got it. I don't understand Lifestyles of the Rich and... I'm Robin Leach, and people living high on the hog, but not you. Like, why would you want to watch that? Not me. I did watch a lot of Star Search. Star Search and Solid Gold. Now, Star Search was good because in the beginning they had comedians, actors, singers, dancers, and then spokesmodel. And if you tuned in, you could get a gamut of funny people, talented people, and the spokesmodel was like, holy cow. That's where, what's her name? Bobby Brown, not the singer, the spokesmodel, the girl that was in the Warrant, She's My Cherry Pie video. That's where she got her start. I watched, this whole episode is just trash. I just watched a lot of trash. I watched Solid Gold. I watch Solid Gold now. It's on YouTube. Rick Dees, Marilyn McCoo, and the Solid Gold Dancers. Oh, my God. And Pam Rossi, the lead dancer on Solid Gold. Solid Gold. I watched a lot of Solid Gold. There was another show that didn't last very long. It was called That's Hollywood. And it was narrated by Tom Bosley. And it was basically just Hollywood stories that they could make out of clips. I got into it because they used to show Darth Vader's TIE fighter in the opening credits. They would show the Poseidon going upside down, and then it would cut to Darth Vader's TIE fighter. And I was like, oh my God, there's Darth Vader's TIE. This is, again, before home video, before you could watch this stuff. So every week, if I tuned in for a few seconds, I could see Darth Vader's TIE fighter in the trench from Star Wars. And that was a big deal. All right, I'm going to end on one of my favorite shows from the 80s that was trash. And it was called It's Your Move. And it starred Jason Bateman, David Garrison, Karen Kay, and Ernie Sabala. This was the show that the guys... Oh, and Garrett Morris was on it, too. This was the show that the guys who made Married with Children, right before they made Married with Children, they made It's Your Move. So it's kind of the same style of people that love each other but are mean to each other. And it's kind of cynical, but not really. And it was about... Jason Bateman played Matthew Burton. He was a kid who could pull off a scam. He was always scamming people. And he meets his match when David Garrison, who plays Norman Lamb, moves in across the hallway of their apartment building and starts dating his mother. So Norman Lamb is a con man too. So the show is just them trying to one-up each other in cons. Great show, funny. I taped a bunch of them and watched them over and over again. The one where his friend Eli becomes the goalie on the soccer team. The one where they have a sleepover that he bugs so he can listen to their pajama party and their slam book. And that one has a guest appearance by Justine Bateman, Jason Bateman's sister. She was from Family Ties, so of course I love that one. And there was a two-parter where they invent a band called the Dregs of Humanity to play at the dance so they can keep the money that Eli has lost. It's very complicated. But it was a two-parter. And I remember when the second part aired, I went to Disneyland with Toby and Tim Barnhart. And I missed how it ended, so I had to wait like a full year for it to end up in a weird syndication loop and watch it, because It's Your Move only lasted a season and a half. The first season ended, and it was very intact, and then when it came back for an attempt at a second season, they retooled it, and it was not as good. They took all the edge out of it. They softened all the characters. And it was obvious, like, well, that's not the show anybody wants to make. So everybody just sort of bowed out. And they moved right on to Married with Children. But It's Your Move was a great show. I loved Jason Bateman from Silver Spoons. And he's a cool guy. And boy, what a career he's had, right? He is able to just, without becoming a big movie star, and he is a legitimate star, absolutely. But he's never, like, reached beyond his grasp on these projects. He's always been like the other guy in the movie. He's this guy in the movie. You know, in Hancock, he's the other guy in the movie. Then Arrested Development made him a big star all over again. But I'll never forget him from Teen Wolf 2. You know, Teen Wolf 2, TOO. It's Your Move, man. I love that show. I watched every freaking episode. Mort the Lumberman, Mort Stumpelrut, he runs the lumber place in town. Remember, a woman is just a woman, but you can build things with wood. Mort the Lumberman, like, over. I watched these episodes, I taped them on my beta player, and I watched them so much that I even knew every commercial that was in the break, because I hadn't edited the commercials out when I was recording it. So I knew all the commercials too. So that became comfort food for me. And I took a beta tape and recorded on it for, I stretched it to its full 6 hours. And I taped 6 hours of episodes of It's Your Move, MTV videos, episodes of INLA, and I still have, like, I ported it over to DVD back in the early 2000s, and I still have it. And I've chopped some pieces out of it. Because, It's Your Move you can get at cons. And you can watch compilations of commercials or the music videos. You can't watch INLA. So I remember chopping those out and putting them up on YouTube just like as preservation. But 86, 87, when, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. And I couldn't get a date. I couldn't get a girl to be interested in me at all. I just watched TV, and TV became my friend. And I watched these shows over and over again, to where I knew some of them by heart. I mean, the It's Your Move shows I know by heart, and it's weird to look at them. Look back. Like, I've got this paper, these lists of these shows, but it's weird to look back and like see all the hours that I spent watching these shows, and the commercials, because you couldn't escape. There was no fast forwarding through commercials in the 80s. You watched them, and that's why the prophecy of Demolition Man has come true, because I will sit down, put on 80s commercials on YouTube, and just watch them, and they're so comforting. Isn't that weird to think that commercials are comforting and that you would just sit and watch them? And yet, I do. I like to pick out people who would become big stars. Like, oh, there's Jason Alexander selling the McDLT. There's Tom Wilson selling KFC biscuits. There's Leah Thompson selling Burger King, and so on and so on and so on. But TV, man, like Homer Simpson is like, oh, TV, my friend, my lover. You're everything to me. Hey, what did you watch? Did you watch any of these shows? Did you watch different ones? Did you watch BJ and the Bear, or The Misadventures of Sheriff Lobo, or Mr. Merlin, or The Whiz Kids? I could go all day. Just show She's the Sheriff, Carter Country, Madam President with Madeline Kahn. And I remember 87, 88, turning on Channel 11, and Saturday night, they weren't airing a movie. They were airing this show about a werewolf. Like, what is this? And that was the beginning of the Fox network. You know, they had not Simpsons. They had the Tracy Ullman Show, Married with Children, and a show called Werewolf about a werewolf guy. And I watched all that crap. I even watched the Friday the 13th TV series, even though it didn't have Jason in it. And I watched Freddy's Nightmares. And Tales from the Dark Side. And the new Twilight Zone. All right, I've wasted enough of your time. I'm like that TV show. I've wasted all your time. Waste. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in, man. I hope you're staying sane in this crazy time. And when everything opens back up, when Disneyland comes back open, I can't wait to go. I'll see you there. I will see you at Disneyland. I am Jeff Tucker, and this is 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
Well, that wasn't such a chore now, was it?
I have written down your prosperity dates. I'm ready to share it with you. Press 1, press 1. Again, I have written down several dates that your angel stands before you. Press 1, press 1. You cannot miss these dates. They're fast approaching. I must share it with you now. Press 1 to hear this blessed word. Press 1 to hear your angel dates now.
If you wish to no longer receive these messages, please hit the option 3 now.
What are you looking at, butthead?